Good evening and welcome to Westerbeck Auditorium here at the beautiful Pasadena City College. My name is Frank Cardenas. I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Pasadena City College Foundation. This is a very special evening for us. Some years ago, under the leadership of Ms. Nancy Davis, a longtime friend of Pasadena City College and the foundation, started what we call a Hometown Legends series. And the idea is to celebrate with and through the PCC community a local legend, someone of or now in the community who is adding something to the fabric that makes this community, of course, so special. And so we've been doing this for several years now, and it's mainly been at other locations. And so we decided that this year we would bring this important cultural series back home to our campus, to our beautiful Westerbeck facility, and invite all of you to join us in a new direction, and that is to be more intentional about our participation both in the community that sustains us, but also in the arts and culture that make the Pasadena area so amazing. Hence this evening. What makes this also a very special evening, a little bit different for us at PCC and the foundation, is the fact that we are in partnership this evening. This is being co-produced by, of course, the music department, our illustrious music department here at Pasadena City College, the PCC Foundation, which exists for one purpose, and that is to harness the generosity of good people like yourselves for our beloved college and our students. And then the third part of this trinity that has come together to make this evening and future evenings, as you will hear, possible is, of course, the Aladena nonprofit, Melodia Mariposa, that has brought, of course, the world-famous Larry Blank here to us tonight. Just briefly, by way of introduction, first, I'm a poor stand-in for the leader of this college, our superintendent president, Dr. Jose Gomez. He was at the reception. Some of you were talking with him. He wasn't able to stay. He needs to be at 3 other places simultaneously. But he sends his best regards to you and looks forward to seeing you at any or all of the 3 special concerts that we will have right here with Melodia Mariposa in the spring. So how did this very special evening that we're going to enjoy together even come about? I happen to have the privilege of meeting an amazing woman. Many of you know Catherine Cadogan. I knew you needed no introduction. And so Catherine and I struck up this conversation at, ironically enough, yet another event for an educational nonprofit. Come to think of it, Catherine. And Catherine started telling me about her favorite passion project, which is, of course, Melodia Mariposa. And she introduced me to the idea of this amazing woman who I have come to adore these last several months. You're all friends of hers, Irina Voloshin. And Irina's passion project, which is making sure that the arts, particularly music, high, beautiful music, is not lost and is not forgotten in our amazing community. So many of you know better than I because you were there. During COVID, Irina began the Melodia productions, the musical performances, in her and other people's driveway in Aladena. And then we know what happened last January. And so since COVID, Melodia had found at least 3 venues that they could perform their amazing music for the community for free. And each of them burned down. So our Director of Development here at Pasadena City College Foundation, Dr. Amy Carnes, and I got to talking, and we thought, we have a beautiful auditorium here at Pasadena City College. We went to the president of the college, Jose Gomez. He said, absolutely. We went to the president of our foundation board, Mr. Hoyt Hilsman, who is here. Hoyt. Hoyt's name sounds familiar, noted playwright in his own right. So the arts are in our DNA. And so we have partnered with our music department and Melodia Mariposa to make this possible. And so I have the high honor of introducing the woman who has made all of this possible tonight. And just one could recite Irina's bio, but that's online and you can all see that for yourself. It's so impressive. You know, she waited until the ripe old age of 6 to even pick up the violin, right? And then she studies in Odessa, Ukraine, which is where she's from, and the very famous music school, and graduated from the conservancy there, 8 or 9 years with the Odessa Philharmonic. Then came to the United States, thankfully for us, about 30 years ago, and her reputation preceded her. She immediately gets booked. She's done over 200, 300 movies. Who keeps count anymore? Has worked with some of the best in the business, including, of course, Mr. Blank. But what really impresses us here at PCC and why we're so enamored with Irina is what she has done in and for the community that has sustained Pasadena City College for over 100 years. And so after the fire happened, Dr. Gomez said, look, the community needs us. And so while the foundation exists to raise money for one client, our college, we also exist to promote good organizations in our community that are helping to rebuild and recover from the devastation of the fire. And that's why being able to partner with Irina is an absolute no-brainer. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and a special thanks to our board president again, Mr. Hoyt Hillsman. I also want to acknowledge all of this. The PCC is the jewel of the California community college system for a reason. We do have great leadership, and that includes our board of trustees. Trustee Tammy Silver here, who you all probably know, is here. Tammy, thank you so much for being here. Foundation board member Jeff Baum is also here, the secretary of our board. Foundation advisor Lonnie Shield, Bill Krantz, a friend forever, Mel Cohen, anyone else, Vivian Chan, anyone else who I may have missed, Bobby and others. Bobby, thank you so much for being with us, Bobby Moon. And so, just thanks to all of you for being here with us as we begin this partnership with the incomparable Irina Voloshin.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I feel uncomfortable to hear all about me. I have to tell you that it's not me, it's all of you, it's all of us, our beautiful board, and we'll talk about it later. But first, I want to thank you all to be here and for coming. And we're super excited to be here in this beautiful hall. And the reason why I'm not on stage, because I've been there since 6 years old, and we like our events to be close and personal. So I'm here for you. You can reach out. I'm here. So we are super excited about our lecture series, Conductors, this year. So James Conlon, who is an opera conductor, he started the first lecture. Tonight we have Maestro Larry Blank, who is a specialist in Broadway and other stuff. And we'll have a Hollywood conductor in the spring. But we'll talk follow and our subscription, our newsletter that Catherine creates so beautifully, and you will know all the news. So I would like to introduce our beautiful participants tonight. And you can read their bios. I agree. You can read their bios, but I'm going to say a couple words what I think about them. So Zach Matthews, what I've learned, he's the chair of music department. Okay, so it's a big position, but also he plays bass. And not only he plays bass, he covers jazz and classical music. And I have to tell you, I played classical, I'm a classically trained violinist, and I know how difficult to improvise. I cannot improvise, so I cannot. So for me, it's like big respect for that. And Shin is a director of orchestras. And I asked him, what does it mean? How many orchestras you director? And he said, ooh, I think it's 4. No wonder he doesn't have time, right? It's just a lot of, and he used to work for Harmony Project, and this is absolutely amazing project. So, about Maestro Larry Blank. He is conductor, he is composer, arranger, orchestrator, and also he's a writer. He wrote a book. How many else, how many more talents you have? It's like enough for one person. So tonight we'll have a book signing. And I have to tell you, you can read his bio. He was nominated, he worked with all the famous people. But I've been member of Pasadena Symphony for many years. And when Master Larry Blank came to conduct with Pasadena Pops, it doesn't happen very often when all the musicians in the orchestra like the same conductor. So, Pasadena Pops, we love Larry. I don't know what he does. He's super professional, he's charming, his sense of humor is superb, and he is just absolutely amazing human being. So that's my experience with Larry. And who can say better about Larry Blank than Dolly Parton?
I think what you and Larry Blank did, I know Larry did such a wonderful job with all this big production and the music. We hardly ever talk that much about him, but how y'all took the songs, you worked with him very close on getting what you wanted and what you wanted the music to be. I mean, I certainly did my part, but so did everybody else, and I really think Larry did such a wonderful job making it so big and grand. I would have never been able to do that myself. So you always need those great and talented people like that. What about our little
I'm Zach Matthews, and I'm so pleased to see you all here. This is a funny time of year for us to have an event like this, and we appreciate in the midst of all the holidays and for our students, the finals and the juries and all the things and the concerts that we have going on. We really appreciate you being here. We wanted to make this about community, and we have really these 3 communities that are here between Mariposa and the music community, the PCC community, our students, our faculty, the foundation, and all the wonderful, important people who make these things happen. We just wanted to appreciate all of you for being here and giving us this opportunity in community to talk about a very, very fascinating life. Now, we have some questions in mind here, but I have a feeling because the conversations that I've had with Larry, they just tend to go interesting places, so we're just gonna see where this goes. But to start it off, let's find out, Larry, how did you get your start in this madness?
Well, I walk in here today and I say, thank you, I'm finally in college. And, well, what happened was I was a kid who grew up in New York City, going to the theater as you do as a New York City kid. That's what people do, and parents take you to the theater because there was just so many musicals on Broadway and plays. And I got very interested and I wanted to be an actor. And after a period of time, I have to say, I always played the piano. We had a piano in the house and my mother was a very good pianist and she said, you have to learn how to play, so I did. But first I learned to play the guitar just to be spiteful. And then I learned the piano. And what finally happened is I went to the High School of Performing Arts as a drama student. And I found out that I didn't like acting, and everybody was asking me to play the piano for them. So I switched to music, and all of a sudden I was getting hired at the age of 15, 16 to play rehearsal piano for off-Broadway shows. And that's how it all began, and I became more and more interested in music, and I thought I'd better start studying. And what happened, I was working so much that going to university became unlikely. I was already making a living by the time I was 16, 17, 18. So I said, I better study, and I started reading every book possible. I was meeting all the Broadway conductors, and I would say, teach me. And I would watch them, and actually paid my way through lessons with several people. And that's how I learned my craft. And then I started getting hired well before I was qualified to do it. But I guess my studying paid off.
So Larry, so when you started on Broadway and doing all of these gigs, at what point did you start to see transition points in your career? When did it start to branch out into other things?
Well, the first thing that happened was I was playing piano for a lot of people. And by the way, I love telling this story, and I'll just jump into it a little bit. I got a call from another pianist around Broadway. And the reason I got the call is I was 16 years old, and I was probably the least expensive pianist in all of and I wanted to do things. And this pianist said to me, his name was Barry, and Barry said, I got this act called Adam and Ira, one was an Italian singer and the other guy was a comic, which was very typical of the clubs in those days. And he said, I have to quit because I have a job with this chick singer named Bet, who's going to be playing at the Continental Bass. And of course, that other pianist was Barry Manilow. And that was my first job. And just to put a clincher on it, I didn't see him again for 35 years, where I was called by him to orchestrate on a recording. And I walked in the room and he looked at me and said, are you that 16-year-old kid? So that's how I got started. And I was playing rehearsal piano, and finally I was hired to be the replacement assistant conductor for a tour of a Stephen Sondheim show called A Little Night Music. And I was 21, 22 years old. Now I had played rehearsal piano for a lot of other shows, but all of a sudden I was working with Steve Sondheim, Hal Prince, these were big Broadway names, and they actually put me on the podium to conduct. And my studies as a conductor were with a good Broadway conductor named Rudy Bennett, who really taught me how to conduct. And he worked on a lot of classical music with me. So when I got up on the podium at age 21, 22, I was a pretty cocky kid because I didn't know what I didn't know. And very shortly after that, a friend of mine was conducting a Broadway show called Good Time Charlie, which featured Joel Grey, who just won an Academy Award, and Anne Reinking. And he said, I'm leaving, so do you want to take over? And at age 22, I was conducting at the Palace Theater for Joel Grey. So I have to say I was very lucky.
Well, we had a conversation earlier about preparation, and we talked about this idea that there really isn't luck, there is where preparation meets opportunity, and you had done all of that great preparation. You had done the reading, you'd done the studying, you'd followed people. I'm curious, and when the opportunities came up, you were there and you were ready for them, but New York in the 1970s, like there's been a lot of, those of us who didn't spend time in New York in the 1970s, we've seen a lot of it on TV, and it looked like an interesting, gritty place. Give us a minute of just what did that look like as a musician, as a young musician, New York, 70s, going around from place to place, from job to job. What did that look and feel like?
Well, I grew up there, so I wasn't intimidated by the streets of New York, which were pretty horrible, actually. When you look at old movies and you see what it was like in Times Square, and I was living in the middle of Manhattan. I loved it. But I also don't want to make light of the fact of a lack of education. I was studying really hard, so I was prepared. When I got called to conduct on Broadway, I was very confident because I had really put the time into learning it. What I didn't have was a lot of experience, but I had a great deal of knowledge here and from observing so many shows. But the competition in New York was frightening, but there was also an extreme amount of work. There was a piece of the pie for everybody. There was piano jobs, there were clubs, there were recordings, there were Broadway shows. You could play in little clubs playing piano. There was work up in the Catskill Mountains. And you could tour around the country with different bands. There were shows touring dinner theaters and summer stock all year round. So there was tons and tons of work. There was always something. You weren't going to starve at whatever level you could find. And that was the New York that I grew up in. Also, it was much less expensive than it is now. Not just because of time, it was less expensive. It was a very livable place.
I can only imagine that to be a fascinating time. So, following up with the actual question I was supposed to ask next, which is the transition from Broadway to Hollywood. How did that happen for you? Was it? I mean, it's the kind of thing where suddenly you move to LA and things, and you're in a different scene in a different world. What was that like for you?
Well, I have to give the credit to Marvin Hamlish. I was hired. I had a relationship with another conductor on Broadway named Don Pippin. He had mentored me when I was very young and was recommending me for a lot of shows. And he recommended me when I was 25 to conduct the tour of a chorus line. And a chorus line in 1975, 76, 77 was a gigantic thing. And Marvin Hamlish was on every TV show, had won 3 Academy Awards in 1 year, and was a big name on television. So my friend Don turned down a show called They're Playing Our Song, and he said to Marvin, "Why don't you get the kid who did chorus line?" And I went over to Marvin's apartment. I had actually never met him. And I walked into his apartment. He says, "If Don says you're good, you got the job." I was 27 years old, maybe 26, and this was a show written by Neil Simon and Marvin Hamlish, and all of a sudden I was conducting this big Broadway show. So, Hollywood. The show tries out here in Los Angeles, so I got to be a little familiar with seeing Hollywood and being there, but I really didn't know it. About a year into the show's run, my phone rings, and it's Marvin. He says, "Get on a plane. There's a plane waiting for you at Kennedy, and pack a tuxedo." Okay, so I get on the plane, my assistant takes over Playing Our Song. I get off the plane, there's a car waiting for me, which was a whole other experience. Marvin had sent a car for me. They take me over to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I walk on the stage, and there's about 100-piece orchestra sitting there. And I have no idea who they are. The horn player stands up and says, "Hi, Larry." And it was somebody I knew from earlier in my career, and his name was Bill Lane. He was the first horn with the LA Phil. So the orchestra in front of me was the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And I have a suitcase in my hand. And Marvin literally throws a baton at me and says, "Conduct." I walk on the podium, there's no music. I said, "Marvin, what is this?" He said, "Who cares? It's in 4. And I asked, 4 beats to the ball. And the musicians are looking at me like, "Oh, great, here's this kid." So I start conducting, and the music's nobody does it better. So I knew the song. And all of a sudden, my career in Hollywood began. So Marvin started calling me for various projects, and he was doing a lot of concerts with every symphony orchestra in the US, and I became his conductor. So within the next 2 years, I had guest conducted every orchestra in the US. So also luck, but I was prepared. And also I was also conducting Marvin's music, which I knew inside out. and a lot of film music.
So Larry, I was just thinking, just listening to your stories about your growing up and how you learned, and it seems like a lot of your learning actually happened just through experience and either sitting in rehearsals, observing people, and just working a lot, and not so much in the classroom. Actually, classroom learning. As an educator myself, I'm very similar in that I spent a lot of time in the opera pit, spent a lot of time watching orchestra rehearsals and conductors and following them around and asking them questions and doing all of that stuff. And I agree that most of the learning, most of the great learning happened there. But do you think is that more valuable than the classroom? Do you feel?
Well, I think the classroom is very important because you need people to show you what you're looking at. I mean, you can look at a book and it says, you know, be careful about putting the third in the bass and the first inversion, but it doesn't mean anything unless they explain to you why, or why it sounds the way it does, and you have to have someone pointing along the way. And I had a lot of mentors who really helped me along, so it's not just a question of getting up and doing the job. It's having people in the classroom or on site actually showing you what it's about and passing on the stories like I am right now, that you retain so much information by hearing it from somebody else.
Thank you.
I do think there's an interesting dynamic to the start of the career that you had, where you were able to get into these situations and things just happen. I'm trying to imagine your first conducting gig, having not done it the way that we do it here, where you know you go to a class and you learn some technique, and then maybe after a little while you go and you conduct a small student ensemble, and then you do more things, and gradually you grow over time. But just to get thrown in the way that you do, I don't know, that I'm fishing for a story that I don't know exists, but what was that first conducting moment like?
Well, the first time I conducted was at a theater in Ohio with the Kenley Players, and I really was scared to death. And I got up in front of this orchestra, and even though I had studied the manual technique with what you can do with your hands, and I conducted piano players and maybe conducted, you know, 5-piece orchestras from the piano, I was pretty scared. And I have to say, and I can say it now, I was pretty terrible. Primitive is a good way to describe it. But I realized that instantly. And I wasn't conducting a show, it was part of a rehearsal. And I knew that at that point, I really had to study. And you're talking about it, it's triggering all these things I had long forgotten. I was hoping never to. But that's what happened, and I realized at that time when I got back from that summer, I took my studying very seriously.
And you had a mentor at that time who was?
Well, my mentor was this man named Rudy Bennett, who had actually studied conducting with Pierre Monteux.
Oh.
So even though he was just another pretty Broadway face, he actually had a very serious classical background. And I have to tell this to everybody because it makes me laugh. He would sit at the piano and he would play classical pieces and make me learn them and conduct them. And it was just him at the piano. And he had incredible pianistic technique, and he'd play and I'd be conducting. And he'd say, "Why are you goosing butterflies?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What's this and that?" He said, "Bring your hand down and make the orchestra play." And I've never forgotten that. Of course, I love repeating the story because it's so descriptive. But it's true. And what I learned is to be very deliberate in my conducting.
So, I'm thinking always from the teacher perspective. It's just because I've just had some recent experiences with some of my classes recently, and kind of sharing stories like you are. But if you're looking back on it, and if you had a group of students in front of you, what would you say is the most important life lesson through your experience?
About conducting or just in general?
Just in what music has taught you, I guess.
Oh, I'm trying to be funny, but I have to repeat this. There was a very wonderful arranger conductor named Van Alexander, and he wrote a book on writing your first arrangement, and he was most famous for writing the arrangement of, and the song Tisket Tasket of Ella Fitzgerald. And he lived to be a little bit over 100, and wrote tons of stuff for the old Dean Martin show, many, many television shows. And he would always say, Larry, remember one thing, friend or foe, get the dough. So that's the life lesson. But the most important thing is, from a standpoint, there's lots of work, but you must be prepared for when the opportunity comes so that you can do it. Otherwise, you're not going to do it again. So, yes, I was very lucky, and I had whatever gifts I had, but I really studied. And when I stepped into that Broadway show, I walked onto the podium. I didn't have to open the score. I was fully prepared. And the other thing I learned early on, when you're going in as a replacement conductor or as an associate conductor, to totally imitate what the person before you did. Good, bad, or indifferent. Because that's what everybody's expecting to see. And that's why it's good to have in a conducting class a teacher who shows you gestures that work. You may have to adjust them for your own body, but that's just talking as a conductor. We haven't talked about arranging and all the rest of it.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if some of you who aren't trained musicians understand how hard some of this is, and I'm kind of amazed by the depth of knowledge and skill that you developed so early. You must have worked incredibly hard. That just, y'all don't know how hard he must have worked to get there. So it's a great testament that you had those opportunities, but that the preparation was in place. So
I have to say I was very ambitious, obviously, and I really wanted to succeed, but the one thing I did learn very early on is when I would meet some of these people like Don Pippin, who was the big Broadway conductor, and my friend Rudy Bennett, and later on Irwin Kostal, who orchestrated West Side Story and Mary Poppins and Sound of Music, took me under his wing. And when these guys spoke, I didn't argue. I knew to listen. And I listened to everything they said, and I absorbed it into my own persona as much as I could. And I really was very respectful about it. Yeah.
So all of these stories and all of this background is also in the context of you right now incredibly busy internationally, touring. You're working with an orchestra in France and touring around. You were here for a minute and doing all of these different things. And in the midst of all of that, somehow you got the crazy idea of also writing a book, which will be for sale later, and there'll be a signing. Understanding the complexity of what it takes to write a book and to tell those stories and to dig deep into your backstory and retell it. What was your impetus for writing that book? What caused you to take that step?
Well, what was happening is I was coming upon my 7th decade, and I said to myself, I said, I have a very good memory, I remember everything. And I really wasn't doing it for profit or for any other reason except to put it down as a legacy for my children and to write a little memory of what growing up in New York City was like, growing up in show business, in the theater, which is tended to be my specialty. And I just wanted to paint a picture of it for myself and for my kids. That was the motivation. And I just tried to write it like I speak, in the same manner. And then I had an editor who went through it, and my wife went through it, and corrected my grammar, which she does in French as well. And that's the reason I wrote the book.
Did it bring some things up you hadn't thought about for a while?
It did, and it brought up a lot of memories, and some people said I put too many names in it, but I remembered everybody's name, so I said, why not memorialize it?
Yeah.
And let them, when they see the book, they go, oh, wow, I remember that too.
Fascinating. And how has the response been? Are you hearing from some of those names?
Well, I've signed both copies. It's selling like hotcakes. I think they sold 6 of them. No, it's the response to the book is very, very positive in terms of the content, and people do think of it as a memory of a certain time in New York City and in the theater.
Very, again, I'm sort of shifting focus again because I'm thinking about our students. I recently had a class session with my music history class actually, and we were talking about pursuing a career in music because a lot of those students are actually in the midst of preparing to transfer to their four-year college, and they often ask me, am I right in pursuing a career in music? And I will go on the record and I tell them, don't do it. Don't do it. And I say that jokingly because I tell them it's hard. It is very hard. It's not because a lot of students kind of go into it thinking like, oh, this is so much fun and this is great. But then I tell them, there is a real life aspect to this. You realize you have to make money from this, and it's the thing that my parents said, like, oh, you'll never make you can't make money doing music. What are you talking about? But after hearing your stories here, but just the amount of work that goes into it, and I think that's what our students aren't aware of, because they're just so mesmerized by what the actual art form is. But if you were standing in front of our students here, and I guess from your experiences, what was the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you about pursuing a career in music? And would you pass that advice on to them? That same advice?
I think the most important thing is having a passion for it. It's like anything you do. If you don't have a passion for it, it's not worth doing. You can't do it for the money because there's no guarantees. For instance, their Broadway shows, in the old days they had orchestras of 26 musicians, and there would be 10 to 15 Broadway shows running at one time. That's over 300 musicians working in the Midtown area of Manhattan. Now, the shows have bands of 4 to 12, and shows close. So it's not steady employment. And if a show doesn't run, you're out of work. And there's no guarantee of anything. So that's the negative part of it. The positive part is if you have the passion for it and you have the skills to do it, there are outlets to make a living. And you'll get concert work as a player if you're an instrumentalist, or as a writer, or as a music copyist, or as a teacher. And I have to say, as I've grown older with the business, I kept on being asked to lecture and teach, which was always strange because I didn't have a proper degree or education. I originally was asked to teach at USC in the external department, teaching film orchestration and conducting. And I found I loved it because I was paying it forward. I was paying it forward with what people gave to me and passing on this amount of knowledge that I had collected over the years. So, getting back to answer your question, I think that it's important if someone really, really has the passion for wanting to be a musician of some sort, there's plenty of work to be found. You just got to stay focused.
There is work to be found, and the focus, the challenge that I struggle with for our students is that in an environment where there is less work than there used to be across the board in all styles of music, some of you may remember when there was a band in every hotel lobby had a band, and there were shows everywhere, and it's a different environment now. So it's that first, let's call it, I'm sorry students, 10 years, that first 10 years where you've come out of school, college, with whatever degrees or lack of degrees, you've got skills, you're ready to go, and it's really, really, really hard to make it to that next step where you are comfortably living and where the definition of success is surviving as a musician and doing music. What can we as a community, and I think some of the answer is in the word community, what can we as a community do to encourage our young musicians to continue these great traditions of music with the incredible skills that they're developing in these environments that don't pay the rent yet? How do we get them there? I don't know that I'm putting you on the spot. It's actually a difficult question.
I was going to pass them.
Yeah. So, Henry, what can we do to inspire?
Well, the thing is, what Irina's doing with Melodia Mariposa and with the Pasadena Pops and all these orchestras, we have to support them. We have to support, I mean, it's a broken record, we have to support live music. And by the same token, I try to not help fake music like AI and stuff like that. I have a little group on Facebook where I talk about musical theater orchestration, and if people start talking about making music AI, I throw them out of the group. I'm not joking. I say, don't bother me with that stuff. And I'm very strong on saying keeping live music and encourage. We don't have our kids anymore learning instruments in school. When I was in junior high school in New York, there was a school orchestra. And I think in some grade schools there were orchestras. But it doesn't seem to exist on a general level anymore.
Not at the same level.
And donations and stuff are going in different directions.
So this is the great concern, and we at the college level we're seeing the aftermath of there being less student programs. But I think ultimately those grow with community pressure, and that pressure will come from parents when the kids are excited to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the littlest of the little people, we want to get them excited to do the thing, so that they tell Mom, I want lessons, I want to do this, I want to do that, and making the arts more fun, making them more enjoyable for the young people to do them. We all of us, we have to figure this part out. So
Making it more accessible and to encourage everybody to play an instrument. And you know, if someone comes in your living room and they want to play your piano, encourage them.
yeah, thank you. We wanted to leave a good amount of time here for community questions. We know there will be some community questions, so we have a microphone handy, and we want to know what your questions are for Larry Glenn. We have a microphone going around.
Larry, I'm assuming you're mentoring some young conductors now. Can you sort of talk about that experience? Are they traveling with you, or you have young conductors in cities all over the world that you're mentoring?
Well, what happens is usually when I work on a show, I usually have an assistant, and they want to be mentored. They want to, not only do they want to get more work and have me recommend them, they really want to learn how to do it. So whenever I have the opportunity, I do recommend them, the people who are working as an assistant to me. I get many, many emails from people around the world, some whom I've met and some have seen me do a show somewhere and they ask some questions, and I always take the time to respond. And I should say also that during COVID, I started teaching online. And I was doing it for myself, to be honest, to keep my tools sharp. Because when you teach, you keep your tools sharp. And also, I wanted to spread it around, and it gave people an opportunity to occupy their time instead of sitting around and eating and drinking too much.
Larry, could you describe the orchestration that you did that prompted Dolly Parton to say what she said in the video? What was that story, and what was the orchestration that you did that caught her so strongly?
She's a very nice person, and I didn't pay her to do that. That was actually a spontaneous video she did and was sent to me, and I was very flattered. I work on a film called Christmas on the Square, which was a television film that Dolly wrote all the songs for. And they asked me to Broadway-fy them and make it more theatrical, because she was, matter of fact, the first thing I said to her when I actually met her was, I had already worked on some of the songs and she was hearing them. I said, Dolly, is there anything you want me to change? And she says, well, darling, you already changed all my chords. But she was very sweet, and that's what she was talking about. I had taken her basic guitar songs and written them for a 50-piece orchestra. And she was very happy. Never a complaint. And very pleasant to work with. So what you saw up on that screen is the real deal. That's exactly how she is.
Larry, looking back over your entire career, what is the one, I guess, production, orchestra, what's the one thing you think was the greatest thing you accomplished, either orchestrating or conducting and so forth, that you believe is your numero uno, so to speak?
I will tell you, it's an easy thing for me. In 2002, I was asked by Stephen Sondheim to conduct Sweeney Todd at the Kennedy Center. And I have to say that was the most satisfying and happiest time in my career. Not just saying that Stephen Sondheim is the greatest anything or anything like that. It was just such a satisfying piece of music, and to be conducting it with the composer present in his lifetime, with Brian Stokes Mitchell and Christine Baranski, was just a pleasure. And I had a great orchestra at the Kennedy Center, and it was only 10 or 12 performances. But I have to say it was my greatest honor and pleasure. Second to being here.
And there must have been some disasters. Let's have a good one. Let's have a good one.
Okay. I went through a period where I conducted like 3 flops on Broadway in a row. And when I say flops, they crashed and burned. And also, I was getting called to conduct many benefits here in LA and around the country, which I used to call the Disease of the Month Club. And it would be a fundraiser for every disease that happened. And some of them were pretty horrible experiences, but I got to work with a lot of great people. But the story I want to tell is I did a Broadway show called Onward, Victoria. It was not about Queen Victoria, it was about Victoria Woodhull, who ran for president in 1865. You'd be surprised to know she lost. And they made this musical out of it, and it was just horrible. And I had to do, there was 30 previews on Broadway at the Martin Beck Theater, and I was embarrassed to be in the pit because it was so bad. And I was sitting in the theater about to start the show, and I saw John Kander and Fred Ebb, who very famous composer, lyricist. John Kander wrote Cabaret. He wrote New York, New York. Wrote Chicago, the show Chicago. And I saw them walking down the aisle. So I was in the pit waiting for the lights to dim, and I kind of crawled to the bottom. And all of a sudden, tap on my shoulder, and I look up, and it's John Kander, and he says, "I see you." So that was one of the bad ones.
Balance.
You are such a singer's conductor. You really, love voices and you breathe with the singer and you sort of tailor your work to really amplify and support all of the beautiful vocal artists that you work with. You came in onto the scene, you said in the 70s, which is sort of our dividing line between Golden Age and contemporary Broadway. I came up on Golden Age, and that's how I came to love singing and music. And now we see a lot of Golden Age musicals being revived to sort of revive Broadway. And I'm curious how you see the future of Broadway and which musicals and, from your bird's eye view, what can we expect or hope for?
Wow, this is a tough question, and I want to hide with my answer. I was very fortunate in that I grew up at a time where I was young enough and old enough. I was old enough to know some of the old timers and work with people like John Raitt and people who were the stars of another time. George Hearn did a lot of Broadway shows, and just innumerable people like that. And so I'm very grateful for all of that. And it's changed drastically. It's not the same animal anymore. That's the problem. Broadway is not the Broadway that you're talking about with the Golden Age. It's a whole new thing. It doesn't even resemble it to me. And when they do the revivals, it's just not as good. Occasionally they'll do a revival and they'll use the full orchestration instead of a synthesizer and a couple of drums. And I relish having a big orchestra. So when I hear as much as I love to hear Hamilton, which is a great success, and it's an orchestra of 6 players, it's not something I want to be near. So that's why now I'm focusing more on conducting the Pops. Right now I've been conducting the show Company in France with a 38-piece orchestra. So I don't have to deal with any of the stuff with the 3 synthesizers and stuff. It still exists. And I know that's not the answer you wanted to hear, but I guess some of the new shows have their merits. But it's a type of music that frankly doesn't interest me much. And I try to listen to everything, but it's difficult.
Hi Larry, thanks so much for being here tonight and coming to Pasadena City College. This is a related question. What can we look forward to from the Pops in this coming season?
Oh, okay. Well, this season of the Pops, we're going to open with a big patriotic show and a lot of John Williams. A lot more film music will be played. I think we also have a couple of other programs like I'm trying to think. It's Bella, help me.
Motown?
Motown, here it is. There's a Motown show, which
And
I'm
Broadway.
looking forward to, and there's an Elton John show, and there's a big Broadway show at the end of the season, which of course is my specialty. So I'm looking forward to doing that, but I think what I want to hear the orchestra do is play a lot of good music and really make them play. And hear a lot more orchestral pieces like the orchestra play. We have a great orchestra with the greatest musicians in town. Let them play. I won't talk so much because I'm using up all my talk today. And by the way, I have to say, I didn't say this at the beginning, I am really honored to be here, and I'm so glad that people want to come and hear me talk about myself. But that's what my book is for. What's most important to me is paying it forward. Mentorship, study, and seeing it continue. And the question about Broadway, I want to see it come back a little bit the way it was. I don't mean that it has to go back in time, but a better version of itself. And that's what I'd like to see, and that's what I'd like to see for the Pops as well.
Well, thank you, Larry, to be here. I kind of wear both hats. I'm involved with the PCC, but I'm also was a past director of Pasadena Symphony. What I'd like to ask, with all the accomplishment that you have listed, which is abundant, what else do you still want to do that you haven't done?
Well, I've been doing a lot more writing, and for a long time, when I became an orchestrator, just because it was actually more lucrative for me, and I was raising a family, and there wasn't as much conducting work. I have recently been coming back to more conducting, but I enjoy writing very much. When I say writing, I prefer orchestrating to composing, and the reason is there are much better composers than me, and I'd rather be able to contribute what I can as an arranger to that, but I want to continue writing big orchestra pieces rather than, when I get called often to reduce a Broadway musical from 26 musicians to 10, and everybody says, wow, it sounds great. I'm sitting there going, I'm glad you think so, but it's just a job for me. I hate to sound negative that way, but I much prefer writing for a big orchestra, and I think that we need to hear it more often. We've been spoiled because once the synthesizers came out, it became about money. It was less expensive. So we've become accustomed to hearing something that is not really a good product. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I want to continue writing for large orchestras. That's what I want to do.
And we want to continue hearing what you are writing for these large orchestras, which leads me to, I think we want the opportunity to maybe spend some time with you afterwards out on the patio. We have some more desserts I think are coming this time around, but I wanted to take this opportunity to first, again, thank the audience for being here, but what you've been saying, I really feel like we have a responsibility as the audience to build the audience. That means going to these concerts. That means bringing your friends to the concerts. And as I suggested earlier, bringing your friends with their children to these concerts and spreading the joy of this beautiful music done in large ensemble settings, which is the only way it sounds right. And with Larry at the helm of our local Pops institution, we're so excited to see what you bring and what happens next. I, for one, will be at those concerts, and I certainly hope that I will see many of you there.
And I just want to say I'm truly flattered that you came to hear me speak, and please buy my book. Joking. I'm grateful for the interest, and I like talking about these very things, and I don't mean to sound negative. I'm encouraged by the music business. I want it to grow, and I want it to come back, and I want Broadway to come back a little bit to more familiar material.
Here's to that. I'd like to invite Irina to come up. Thank you.
What a beautiful treat. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, PCC Foundation, for having us here to partner with us. Thank you, Frank Cardenas, for believing in our vision. Thank you, Amy, that you're being such a great organizer to create all this beautiful evening, and for the whole team, we're so super grateful. Thank you so much for the audience. And if you would like to see more of us, we have a beautiful season ahead. So in February, we have a beautiful 5 cellists, very unique group. In March, we're also celebrating Women's Month. In April, we have a jazz month. It will be a lot of beautiful surprises. But tonight, we're talking about Maestro, and if you want to see him in action and conducting the orchestra, of course, you can go to Candlelight Concert at Pasadena Pops, actually this week. Or you can go to hear him at Melodia Mariposa, December 18th. And I have to tell you, this is our number 4 concert, holiday concert, and Larry's been there since number 1. He's been so super supportive. Thank you so much. And of course, we're gonna have a dessert and book signing. Thank you again for all the catering. Thank you, Amy. And so what I would like to say is just a little video of our last year concert with Larry conducting. Larry is not only a Broadway conductor, he can do anything. He's like Tchaikovsky. It will be Tchaikovsky Swan Lake with the Roberto Cani late concert maestro ballet opera playing solo. That's how we would like to end our beautiful evening. And thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon.